Okay. The first thing I'd like to say is that I would agree with a lot of what Kevin has said. And hopefully, as I tell you about the story of Pinergy and how we transitioned into a business that's focused on sustainability, that some of the points that Kevin was making will also come through in some of the stories and the experiences that I will share with you over the next 15 or 20 minutes. But firstly, just to introduce myself, Enda Gunnell is my name. I describe myself now as a reformed accountant. I'm a chartered accountant by training. I worked for 23 years in professional services here in Dublin with a firm called Mazar. And in that time, I was acting very much in an advisory capacity with owner-managed businesses in particular. That's the area that I liked working on. And I was working with these people over time. And I was helping these people grow their businesses across lots of different sectors. And I suppose for about maybe 10 years, there was an itch that I had to, as I describe it, I wanted to get out of the dugout as an advisor, and I wanted to get onto the pitch as a business owner and to do the startup thing. So I did that. I eventually left Mazars in 2012. I founded Pinergy, which is still an electricity supply business. But when we came to the market, it was very different to the business we have today. It was a business that was founded out of a recession, which is one of the points that Kevin was making earlier, where Ireland was recovering from the 2008-2009 period, and that people needed a different way of engaging with their energy suppliers. And the regulator was also looking for different solutions in this area, because the big suppliers, and there was probably 4 of them at that time, they only had one mechanism to deal with people who weren't in a position to pay their bills. They just cut them off. So other countries had a technological solution, and they had more mature pay-as-you-go energy supply segments of the market. And what we did was we effectively took an electricity company out of a box. We partnered with somebody who was already in the market, had the regulatory supply licenses, and I decided at that time that I was going to get a license from within the industry once they got to know me. And you know, I didn't mind when I was working in Mazars and acting as a business advisor as to what business I would get involved in. You know, I was happy if I had a business that was going to buy and sell widgets. I just wanted to try it for myself. And at 43 years of age, I left a firm as a partner and went to a complete startup. And since then, we've grown the business, you know, significantly. Our budget this year was to try and hit 50 million turnover. COVID would probably challenge us to do that. And in the intervening period, I've probably raised well in excess of 30 million euros to fund the business. It has been very difficult. It has been challenging. But again, like one of the points Kevin has mentioned, I'm quite passionate about what I do, and I have enjoyed everything that we've done. But one of the things that, you know, people often ask me, how did you end up going into electricity? I didn't know anything about electricity. And I suppose that was an advantage when we came into the industry. But electricity was a product that's not going out of fashion. You know, looking at the world and how it's developing and where it's going to this day and looking forward, we are going to use more of that product. And, you know, another point that was very relevant for me at that time was that it's not a discretionary spend. You know, we all need energy. We all need electricity. So it's you know, what I was doing at that time, I was leading a corporate finance practice, and I was selling time. And the only amount of time that I had was the 24 hours in the day. So there was a limit there. And every year I had to start with a blank sheet and start again and make some value out of my time. So electricity was a product that everybody needs. It's not a recession. It's not a discretionary product. But we had a product for a country that was coming out of recession. And I suppose the real important thing for me, having come from professional services, was that when I'm asleep, people are still using electricity. So it's the ultimate recurring revenue stream that my previous life didn't have. So what is Pinergy now? You know, we're still an electricity supply business, and we're one of maybe 8 or 9 players in an extremely competitive marketplace. And we want to be an electricity supplier of choice. We are not for everybody. You won't see us at the top when you go to bunkers. We are not necessarily the cheapest providers of electricity in the marketplace. But over that period since 2013, we have pivoted on numerous occasions to become the business we are now. And at some stage, midpoint during that period, we started focusing, and we became what I describe as a purpose-driven brand. That is now in the red box there, where our belief is that everybody has a part to play in creating a sustainable energy future. And I suppose we're using our position in the marketplace, and we're using technology. You know, we've come into a market that hasn't changed for generations. Literally since 1923 it was when people started getting electricity first. That market, with the exception of deregulation, hadn't changed a huge amount. And we as outsiders came in and we took a customer perspective on things. We started using technology to provide a different solution, but also to use that technology as a means of differentiating us against the competition in the market. So we've moved from a pay-as-you-go domestic-only electricity supplier to now an electricity supplier across both the domestic and the commercial space. Commercial customers is about half of our business now. And we also have an energy services division that is really partnering with our customers to help them reduce their consumption. So we are taking a completely different perspective to the market than the rest of the market today, but also to the market and our approach to the market at the start. So we've had to change and pivot to survive. You know, we're, as I said, we're very different from the business at the start. From those of you who were based in Ireland would probably recognize the big gentleman in the picture on the left. That's Paul O'Connell, former Irish rugby captain, our original brand ambassador. Because before we got out of the starting blocks, we heard that our immediate competitor, we didn't have first mover advantage. We were a Me Too, bringing a solution into the marketplace, and we were quite naive at that time. So we heard they were going on TV and we had to respond. My original business plan did not have TV commercials or big marketing budgets built into it. So we partnered with Paul O'Connell. He became our brand ambassador, became a shareholder in the business, and he's a great friend of the business today. But I suppose, you know, when I meet people now, that, you know, I tell them I'm from Pinergy, they say, oh, is that Paul O'Connell's company? And I presume that shows and demonstrates the longevity that can be had from a good advertising campaign. But equally, we are fundamentally a different business today from that business that Paul joined us with. Equally, we're not into old-fashioned technology like coin meters. You know, that's the type of technology some people think that we're working with. We're not. We're operating in a smart meter digital environment, and we are and see ourselves very much as the digital utility in this country. And we're not Pinterest. You know, we're not Pinergy either. For some reason, people just keep calling us the wrong name. So why did we change? And, you know, as part of that change, we had to change over that journey, and we had to change to survive, speaking bluntly. But thankfully, during that course of change, we found ourselves. We were able to tap into what it was we believed in, and that's the whole sustainability piece that we are now actively promoting in the marketplace. And I suppose there are a number of different steps in that evolution and that change. And I suppose it goes back to how, the starting point goes back to how the market is structured. And I often describe the electricity market as like going into the supermarket. And there's no prices on anything. You go in with your partner, you go in with your kids, all the goods are on the shelves, everything looks fantastic. You just take what you want, you put it in your basket, you put it in your trolley, you go straight to your car and you go home. And at some stage, maybe in 2 months' time, the electricity, or sorry, not the electricity company, the supermarket, they will write to you and they will say, we think you owe us the following on the basis of what you took. And your natural reaction would be expletive. There's no way we could have taken that amount of stuff from the supermarket. If you can manage to contact them and you get through to them, they will admit to you, yeah, it's a best guess. That's what we think you took. Now pay up or you're not allowed back into the supermarket. And that's one facet of the electricity market. That's still largely the same today. And the second is about pricing. You know, this market is dominated on price and competition is based upon price. But they all talk about standard price. There is no such thing as a standard price in the electricity market. Every company has their own definition of standard and they're very good at promoting discounts on the back of that standard. So the market is completely different. How it's structured, it's very different to what we would put up in any other form of life. other forms of life we expect, and I'm sure your business ideas will reward loyalty. That wasn't the case in the electricity market. So we tried, we had to do something different. And, as I've already said, we were spending in the early days a lot above the line advertising. And I'm looking and measuring the response to that advertising over time, which is what you should do. And what it became clear is that the market, who had a particular way of doing business, they continue to do what they do best. They have very deep pockets and they spend heavily to drown out your share of voice. So you respond. How do we respond? We can either double our marketing spend and make sure that we maintain that share of voice above the line, or in our case, because we didn't have the money, we had to do something different. And that something different took us into smart meters. We were the first electricity company in Ireland to invest in smart metering. And we did that for a particular segment of our customer base, which is landlords, property managers, estate agents, etc. And we built a front-end portal on to work with the smart metering, to give the information about the portfolio of properties that the property manager was managing. We made their life in managing properties much easier. For example, somebody wants to come and see an apartment. Do we know if there's electricity on in that apartment? I can check in my dashboard. I can see there's no electricity in number 23. I buy the electricity there and then, and the lights go on. So we started a journey in 2014, early 2015, of differentiating ourselves into smart metering. We created an app to allow domestic customers see and control their electricity in a completely different perspective. And I suppose that was the start of a journey of becoming this purpose-driven brand, where I was looking at the market, I'm seeing that the world is becoming more sustainable. In 2015, in COP21, all the countries of the world signed up for the first time to a global standard to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But I started to look at how the industry is operating. And if you look at competition in this marketplace, everybody was focused on price. Everybody's energy bill, be it gas or electricity, is the same. It outlines the amount of units you've used. It multiplies that by a tariff, a rate, euros or cent. It adds on standing charges, network charges, etc. Bit of VAT. Bottom right-hand corner is an amount of money that you have to spend or to pay. Everybody is fighting around the cent, the price. Nobody in the industry was focused on what I describe as the quantity side of the equation. So we started to look at what we were doing with our smart meters, and we could actually demonstrate to the market that by using the information on the meter, as provided to you through a smartphone app, you could reduce your consumption, and in the long term, over the long term, as opposed to a short-term discount, you could reduce your spend over time. We started to look at things like LED lighting, and we started to sell LED lighting to our customers at wholesale price and use the smart meter to recoup the cost of that over a longer term contract. That moved on to us doing complete retrofits for apartment blocks as a means of getting access to the commercial supply for the apartment block, and more importantly, getting access to the tenants and the occupants in the building. So effectively, the technology was out there, but as I've said, countries and sectors have signed up to this protocol internationally to reduce greenhouse gases. Yet, in the energy industry, I believe there's an inherent conflict in that energy companies and utilities, on the traditional model, they make more money the more energy you waste, be it domestically or commercially. So I said, what's the incentive for these people to help their customers reduce their consumption? They're going to reduce their revenue, they're going to reduce their profitability. Whereas we, as a challenger brand, took a deliberate position to challenge that norm and to help our customers and us sell less electricity. So if we could help our customer use 50% less electricity over a period of time, my view was it's 100% more than we were selling that customer before we met them. And on the back of that, we started to create partnerships because we didn't have expertise. We didn't have expertise in the energy market, let alone the energy efficiency market. So we started working with providers like LED lighting people, GE, like heat pump people, like microgeneration, to bring solutions to our customers. And I suppose what I was looking for really, I'm giving you a sort of a sequential view here on our journey towards sustainability. you know, a lot of these partnerships were very relevant, but a lot of the domestic customers that we were using, in the absence of a funding model, didn't have the ability to invest in the technology that was going to make them more energy efficient and more sustainable. So I was looking for an approach and an opportunity to get into the commercial marketplace, because the consumption is much higher. And what we did is that we took our smart meter capability, and like what we did in the landlord sector at the very start, we created a front-end portal so that commercial customers could now benefit from interval data associated with their consumption. They could visualize that consumption, and you can actually then give them the information to understand their consumption, make the behavioral change first, and then we can roll out through our partnerships, the technology that's readily available in the marketplace that will help them become sustainable, more energy efficient, and more profitable as businesses over time. And what we're trying to do, I suppose, is change how energy is traded in the marketplace. Energy, electricity, gas, they are commodities, and the world over, commodities always trade on price. And what we're trying to do is change that model. I'm trying to go back to my professional advisory services days, and I'm trying to create what I describe as an advisory-led, relationship-based supply of energy. We want to partner with our customers. We want to help them understand their consumption and work with them through that relationship and bring that consumption and ultimately that spend on energy down. And in doing so, help them become more sustainable in what they're doing in their businesses. And I suppose in that area, you know, I've told you the story there of why we had to change. That change rooted in competition and survival first. But it forced us to differentiate, it forced us to change, but it depends on your mindset. In my mind, being forced to change is an opportunity. You know, I came in from outside of this industry into the industry, and I couldn't believe the amount of opportunity that I saw. And I suppose it's just your mindset, and if you go at it with the right approach, and if you want to change, and necessity is the mother of invention. We were forced to change, and that has provided us the opportunity to go down this sustainability journey, and it's actually tapping into what we believe in. We believe that every person has a part to play in creating a sustainable energy future. And what also gave me a buzz was this hasn't been done before. We're taking on the establishment, we're challenging the norm. And that gives you energy, that gives you enthusiasm to go and fight the good fight and keep going. Because there will be dark days, there have been dark days. And I often tell the story, you know, because of my background, I was in corporate finance, so raising money for the business was half of my job. Half the time I was trying to grow the business, the other half I was trying to find the money to invest in the business. And I can remember meeting a guy for an investment. We created our own loan note, and he invested 5,000 euros. And I met him about 8 or 9 o'clock in a car park of a pub in Lucan. I got the 5,000 euros off him to invest in the business, created the loan note with him, and that money was used the next morning to pay the wages. That's the type of environment that a startup actually is. But it's great crack. So some observations on sustainability. I know the theme of the hackathon this weekend is around sustainability. And just, you know, I described there our journey on that sustainability piece. And I suppose there are some observations that I would share with you at this point in time. First thing is, it's a journey. Sustainability is a journey, not a destination. You know, we started to tap into sustainability, and we've had to evolve and change as you go through that. And by way of example, you know, we thought it was a big thing about 2 years ago that the right thing to do, that all the energy that we would supply would be 100% green or coming from 100% renewable sources. And that, for a period of time, allowed us to stand out a little bit from the market. We weren't the only people, but when you ally that to the energy approach that we had in the marketplace, it became a differentiator. But the markets keep changing. The world will always change. And the challenge for a business is to make sure that they're changing at a pace that's consistent with how the market changes. And 100% green energy now is not sufficient as a differentiator in the marketplace. So that's the point I'm making, that it's, you know, that in itself wasn't enough to make us a sustainable business. We've got to keep going, and we've got to change what that means. You know, for example, we were contacted today by a journalist who wanted to understand where our 100% renewable energy is coming from. is coming from a system that operates across Europe. But that's not as good as us having our own wind farm and solar farm that we can point to and say, that's our energy source and we're bringing that energy to you. And that's where I want to go to. I want to have our own generation capacity in the future. And that will be part of that journey towards more truer sustainability position. The next point there, not a one-stop shop. We have a product, it's an energy. Our energy is 100% green. That doesn't necessarily mean that we are sustainable to the fullest extent. You know, it can be your product. You know, you can decide over this weekend maybe to come out with a product that is into that sustainable piece. There are many facets to sustainability. We're just one part of it. We're in the energy piece of it. And with even, you know, just selling a green product, that's not necessarily enough, in my opinion. It also becomes a way, or sustainability also becomes a way of how you do business. And I suppose as part of our journey towards, and continuing journey towards sustainability, yes, we started to sell a green product, but then we started to do things within the business that were other manifestations of that sustainability ethos. You know, we used to have guys, sales reps, that would call to a business in a diesel car. That's not really consistent with a sustainability message. So as soon as Hyundai Kona came onto the market last year, I did a deal with Hyundai, and all our fleet are now EV cars. And that has to be the way we go. You know, again, I'm learning lessons through this whole COVID lockdown. I don't mind admitting that I was, maybe still am, a bit of a dinosaur in terms of how we carry out business. You know, unlike Kevin, who's been working from home for a long time, you know, my view, rightly or wrongly, was that if you weren't in the office, you probably weren't working to your fullest ability. But I could see, you know, that the business didn't crumble when we went to lockdown. You know, we were actually set up for this anyway. But I suppose when you start looking at it in terms of what we've all seen over the last 8 or 10 weeks, you know, I think we've got a view to what a more sustainable world looks like. You know, and I surveyed the staff and I took the view that remote working, you know, was going to be the norm for our staff going forward. You know, it makes it easier for people. You know, I fully accept it's not easy for everybody, but for those that do find it easy, you don't need to do the commute. You don't need to get into a car and sit in a traffic jam on the M50 and contribute to pollution. So I want to make it the norm for our people to work from home 1, 2, or 3 days a week, or full-time as it suits them. And that's part of a sustainability message as well. Prosumer is the next point. You know, we are in the energy industry on a transition from being energy consumers to prosumers. And that's, you know, the energy industry is only one part of the worldwide. You know, we have been consumers. Take, for example, media. We used to go buy newspapers. Now we have social media where we can either buy our media online, but we can equally use Twitter and we can contribute to the news agenda. That same principle is going to apply within the electricity industry, and we here in Ireland have a long way to go on that journey as well. You know, we you know, as a country, we have decided effectively, or have decided to date, that we're a wind country. All the resources and the supports have gone into wind. They haven't yet gone into solar. But where the world needs to go is that we need to roll out solar panels much more densely than they are here today, like they are in other countries, and to allow people to generate their own power and sell it back to the grid, as opposed to at the moment, if you have a solar panel, and unless you have a diverter that you can use to take that electricity and heat out water, it goes back and the ESB is getting free power. So we've a long way to go on that journey towards being prosumers, and that journey is still stuck in the station of regulation in the government department. So we've a long way to go there. Another point I would make here, going back to some of the principles of the old world still very much are relevant in the new world today. That new world of digital economies, that new world of sustainability. You know, we struggled in the early days to get a big enough customer base because people were easily or coerced to go to another provider. We didn't have first mover advantage. And we have invested a lot over the last 2 years taking our capability in smart meters and rolling them out into the commercial electricity supply market. And that for us is our first mover advantage. And thankfully, we are getting very significant growth over the last 18 months, and with subject to coming out of COVID, and we believe we will come out of COVID in a very strong position. That Pinergy Smart Business product, as we call it, is our first mover in that space, and it will allow us to get traction. So the point I'm making here is that the principles that apply to sound businesses also apply to businesses in the context of sustainability. Your product has got to be, or your chance of success with a product is much better if you have that first mover advantage. And the last point I'd make in the context of sustainability or business in general is that, back to you guys as promoters, as founders, you've got to tell an interesting story. You've got to be the business that you come up with, or the idea you come up with as a startup, to go to the next stage and to get backing. You know, your story has to be interesting. You have to be able to tell that story, communicate that story, but communicating in a story and a proposition, a business proposition, ultimately, that is relevant to the marketplace at that time. And you've got to be to be believable. So your story has to be interesting, and your delivery of that story has got to be believable, because they're the type of propositions that attract investor funding to allow you to scale going forward. So my last points, I think, are around the future of energy. And the future here is all about digital stuff. It's the digitization of the energy markets in the future. The energy markets that have been there in the past are going through a huge amount of change. So there are opportunities in this space. You guys may well have some ideas for the energy market. It is a market that is ripe for change and is going through change. And we very much want to be at the forefront of that. It's going to be about the smart home, where you have, in a domestic context, where you have solar PV, wind microgeneration, heat pumps, batteries and EVs, and it's the communication between all of those and the Internet of Things that is the smart home of the future. And on the right-hand side of the screen there, you can see our next generation products, either in the home or in the business. And it's the digitization of energy in commercial settings and in domestic settings that are part of those opportunities. And I suppose, our role in there, we've evolved and changed over time, and we're going through a brand exercise at the moment, but our position and our brand explanation into the future is going to be all about supplying energy, helping our customers analyze that energy and understand it, and on the back of that, advise them as to what the appropriate sustainable energy strategy is in the future. So that's the Pinergy story. It's my experience, some observations from my perspective in terms of our journey in building a business in sustainability, and hopefully you've got some learnings from that. I haven't put everybody to sleep over the last 20 minutes. So happy to take questions.
Yeah, go for it. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, please unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Thank you so much, Enda.
You're welcome.
I don't have a question, but I want to say thank you. And clapping as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the sad part about doing it on virtual.
No, I did the clapping, so because it's recorded, so you'll be able to see me like
I had a question like flash through, and then it went out when we started talking about clapping. And I just wanted to ask you about, because this is something that the teams are going to have to pitch theirs, about your sort of learning to tell a story, since you came from the financial side of things as opposed to the marketing side of things.
Yep.
How was that sort of your, how was your journey in that aspect of the learning to tell, telling the good story part of your building your company, building Pinergy?
Yeah. Well, I suppose there's a couple of stages. The telling bit is something you develop over time. Some people are more comfortable standing on their feet, communicating a message than others, and that's just something you have to get comfortable with. And I suppose, having advised on the financing side in the past, what people are investing in the early stages are two things. One is the concept. does your product or service make sense in the market at that point in time? And can you communicate to potential investors that this is a product that will scale, will grow as the market evolves over the next period of time? The second thing they're investing in, and probably more important at that stage than the product or the concept, is the people. Can they back you as a management team and feel that their money is safe? Have you the experience, the credibility to actually take money from these people and deliver on what you promised? Because if the management team isn't strong enough, and at the early stages, it could be as simple as you, the one person, unless you have that credibility and you can demonstrate confidence to the prospective investor, ultimately they're backing you. And if they don't feel comfortable in your capability, or that at least you know where your weaknesses are, and if you have the money, and if you've got the money, you know what you want to invest in because there's a blind spot here. What they're backing and what they're investing in is management and management capability.
Okay. I want everybody to know I did not bribe you to say that, because that, again, is something our teams are going to have to include in their pitches, how you're going to scale and why your team is best suited to carry your product forward. So everybody this week has just been reiterating all of the things the teams will need to do this weekend.
And in that whole journey, Caitlin, there's no excuse, or there's no, you can't get away from hard work. So you've got to come across with the passion for your product and your commitment to that product to give the investor confidence that their money is going to be in safe hands and that this person is going to do what needs to be done to get the product over the line.
Awesome. Cool. Well, if anybody else would like, go ahead.
Yeah, just on that, I suppose, kind of related to that, the fact that you're going into a market that had such an established set of existing competitors, and it's particularly such an established model. Was it hard to convince people, I've got such a different model here, this is going to revolutionize and you're going to make your money back? Was that a hard sell?
I don't think so, really, on the basis that the market norms were established for so long. And I suppose, go back to the point that was mentioned earlier, that many businesses are formed in recession. So people were living the recessionary experience, and people could relate to, they wanted to avoid bill shock. They wanted to make sure that they were in control of their energy spend. And if it was going to cost them, say, 20 quid a week, that they could, commit 20 quid and that was it. They knew they were in control of their energy spend. So people could relate to that. But equally, I could point to the same technology being used in different markets. I could also point to the fact that the regulator had decided there needs to be something different in this market, and they had picked the same technology that they were going to invest in as well for people who were in arrears. So part of this is around timing, it's circumstance, it's striking at the right time. It's being in the right place at the right time and just going for it. But the product did make sense. And people, when you can say our nearest neighbor in the UK, 15% of the market over there operates on a pay-as-you-go basis. We don't have anything like that here, and we've just come through a recession where everybody is struggling. That makes sense. So you're over the first hurdle in terms of credibility. And then they will have lots of questions. They'll have lots of successive questions around the technology, around the capability, about your sales strategy, about how you're going to market this, have they got the funding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you've got to get past the first hurdle. Does the product or service that you're offering make sense in the market as it is today and how we think it's going to evolve?
Okay,
cool.
Thank you.
If anybody else has any questions, they can throw them out, or you guys are both on LinkedIn. Kevin and Enda are both on LinkedIn, yes? So you can find them there. That's how I found Enda. So my daily, nightly business thing, if you haven't yet joined the Slack channel, join the Slack channel. I think all of you are on it though. And I will put you in your team. Your teams now have a poll, so you can choose a general problem statement that you would like to work on, and I will assign them to you noon tomorrow. If you do not make a choice, I will assign you one. And so if you would like to play the roulette of me assigning you a topic that I think is interesting, whether or not you think it's interesting, you can not make your poll. That's the only, I'll pick one that I think somebody should solve. So that's all of the business for today. We have one more speaker series tomorrow. We'll have one speaker and a little kickoff pep rally before we start the actual event on Saturday and Sunday. So big thank you again to Kevin and Enda for joining us.
I do have a question.
Today. Okay, go for it.
Sorry. So I think it's great that you are moving on to new technologies, like specifically smart technologies. And I'm wondering if there's any changes in brand image or marketing messages that go with that and what they are.
Yeah. And we've changed our brand image, our brand message a couple of times in our not very long life to date. You know, I can't even remember what the very first tagline was. But I suppose, you know, the first thing was the name. You know, we wanted a name that was not necessarily just related to electricity, but that could allow us to get into other products. But it was, you know, also in a way describe what we did. So the pin was the keypad back in the very early technology, and energy was obviously coming from energy. So one of our taglines at the time was energy you control. Another one, when we came into smart meters, we would have used smarter users use us less. And those of you who are in Ireland might know that we're associated with Munster Rugby, and we have advertising on the back of the coaches' laptops. And when we put up the smarter users use us less expression first, the feedback came back from Anthony Foley, who's now sadly deceased, that his concern was people would read that as useless. So we had to change that. You know, we just stuck to Pinergy. And now we're called, you know, Pinergy more recently as the energy innovators, because we've come in from the outside, we have done things differently. And we're not going to invent the next smart meter. We're not going to invent the next piece of energy efficiency kit. What we're trying to do is to bring customer solutions and present it to the customer and make it easier for the customer. And I suppose our most recent change, or the change that we're working on now, is that the energy innovators and all our messaging on our website and everything we have today is very much aimed towards a consumer market. But now 50% of our business is commercial, and in the short term, our growth is around the commercial marketplace. So we're having to look at how we message ourselves, how we brand and position ourselves for that commercial marketplace. And we're going to try and position ourselves as sort of thought leaders in this space. And you know, we're moving towards an energy with insight expression. So you know, it's okay to change these things. You know, the business change, your business will change, the market will change, and it's about consistency over time. So yeah, it's getting the balance right between changing too much, but be afraid of changing, but you need to be sure of what you stand for and what it is. What is the message you're trying to get out there?
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool.